everyone. I wanted to start today's episode with something that landed in my inbox last week. This was an email I got from somebody, let me call him Rohan. So, Rohan wrote to me, "Hi Sarika, I need your help. I'm constantly facing friction with a colleague. We disagree on almost everything. Meetings get tense, and I feel like he's subtly blocking my work. I don't know. It's like a personality issue or something else, but it's really bringing my confidence down. How do I deal with this? I don't want to escalate things." When I read that, I paused for a moment because this question is not rare at all. Have you ever had that one colleague who just seems to have a PhD in everything, especially making your life miserable? That type you walk into a meeting, you suggest a great idea, and they immediately shut it down. You have the best idea, but they come and say, "No, no, I don't think it'll work." Maybe they're the silent type, the ones who forget to loop you in into the emails. Or they subtly block your progress until you're left questioning your own sanity. We've all been there, lying awake at 3 a.m., replaying an argument and thinking of the perfect comeback we should have said. But at that point in time, we didn't say it. Most people will tell you to just be more assertive or document everything for HR. But honestly, that's not only exhausting but also impractical. And usually it just makes the office drama worse. And that difficult colleague gets away easily. Today I'm going to show you a different way. We're not going to talk about managing egos. We are not talking about winning the argument. Instead, we are going to perform a bit of a surgery on why these clashes happen in the first place. So, Rohan and everyone out there, hear me out. I'm going to share a framework, a very simple framework that I've used with CEOs and sharp founders who turn difficult people into manageable partners without you having to change a single thing about their personality. It's simpler than it sounds. And by the end of this episode, you will have the toolkit to stop the friction before it even starts. If you're tired of tension and just want to do your job with ease, you're in the right place. Let's roll. Let's look at what is actually going on when things get tense. I recently saw a situation where there were two senior leaders, Ananya and Vikram. They were both incredibly smart, they were both incredibly respected, but you put them in a room together, it was total Tom and Jerry. Vikram would push, Ananya would interrupt, and eventually the whole office just labeled them as difficult, rigid, and the CEO was totally perplexed. He was thinking he'll have to fire one of them because he wanted peace. And still, he didn't want either to go. So we sat down. We first wanted to diagnose what the illness was. Believe you me, the problem wasn't Ananya and Vikram. The problem wasn't Ananya or Vikram's personalities. It was that neither of them knew who actually had the final say on the project. Because the structure of the organization was vague, every meeting just became a power struggle. They were trying to be nice people, but they were behaving like jerks because nobody had defined the rules. And this happens because our brains hate empty spaces. So, whenever there's an empty space, by empty space, I mean whenever the situation is unclear, like who owns a task or what does success look like, that's when the brain fills that gap with its own story, with its own masala story. And usually, that story is a negative one. Whenever there's an empty space, the brain cooks up a story like, He doesn't respect me. She is trying to make me look bad. In fact, there's a psychological concept called the uncertainty effect. And research shows that humans find uncertain outcomes more stressful than guaranteed negative ones. We would literally rather know for sure that we're going to lose than to be unsure of the rules. That was the problem with Ananya and Vikram. But here in this podcast, I promised you that I will give you a simple framework to handle this. So here it is. I've devised what I call is the C.L.E.A.R. framework. Obviously, it's an acronym, C.L.E.A.R. Whenever you feel friction with a colleague or somebody looks difficult to you, I want you to stop asking, why is this person difficult? And start asking yourself, what is unclear here? Let's break this down at length because this is the key to your peace of mind. All right, in the C.L.E.A.R. framework, C stands for clarity of role. This is the who does what stage. Think about a relay race. Now, imagine there are two runners. They're both trying to grab the baton at the same time, and they trip. Likewise, in an office, difficult colleagues are often just those people who are trying to grab the same baton. You need to have a conversation, not an argument, about where your lane starts and where their lane ends. For example, instead of getting mad at a colleague because he is micromanaging your report, say, to make sure we're not duplicating work, let's define who's the primary point of contact for this data. I'm sure he's going to relate to it because now you're not attacking them, you're just clarifying the lane. So, C in the C.L.E.A.R. framework stands for clarity of role. Clarify that role and see that difficult colleague become less difficult. Coming to the L of the acronym C.L.E.A.R. L is for limits. This is about boundaries. Where does your responsibility end? If a colleague is blocking you, maybe he might be thinking it's his job to vet your work before it moves forward. If that limit has not been agreed upon, you will feel frustrated. But they'll feel, oh, I'm doing my job. I once worked with a director named Mehul who thought his team lacked ownership. In reality, the team didn't know where their limits were. So they were afraid to make any move in case it was a wrong one. Clarity on limits gives people the safety to actually perform. If you notice, the key point in both C and L, clarity of role and L for limits, is clear. You need to be clear about the role, clear about the limits. So, eventually, in any communication, clarity is of prime importance. We are going to talk about E, A, and R of the C.L.E.A.R. framework right here in the next segment. All right, in the C.L.E.A.R. framework, we have talked about C for clarity of role, L for limits, that is boundaries. Now, E stands for expectations. What does done well really look like? Very often we assume everyone has the same standards. You might think a draft is a rough outline, while your colleague thinks a draft is a polished 20-page document. Now, everybody has a different standard, right? When you hand over the outline, they get angry and you feel judged because their standard was different from yours. So, how can expectations match? This is not a personality clash. The difficult colleague is not difficult because the personality is different. The difficult colleague appears different because your expectations and his expectations are different. There is an expectation gap. Before starting any task with a difficult person, just say a simple line like, just so that we are on the same page, what are the three things this document must achieve to be considered successful? If you're working on one particular document or one particular page, clarify the expectations. Just like you clarified the role, you clarified the boundaries, the limits, clarify the expectations. The minute clarity comes into the relationship, immediately difficult becomes less difficult. Every relationship, be it a friend, be it a colleague, be it a difficult one, be it a simpler one, always has a certain authority. Each person has a certain authority. And clarifying that authority is extremely important to make anybody less difficult. So, A in the C.L.E.A.R framework is for authority. And this is the big one. Who makes the final call? That's the big question. Who has the authority to take the final call? For example, in the story of Ananya and Vikram, this authority was the missing piece. So, when two people believe they both can decide, they will fight forever. You can solve 90% of office dramas by simply asking, suppose we disagree on this direction, who has the final ice breaking vote? Once that is settled, once the authority is clear, ego usually disappears because the rules of the games are set. Again, like I said, you need to have clarity of role, clarity of those boundaries, that is limits, clarities of expectations, what is it when it's done well, clarity of authority, who has the final call, who has the final word. Coming to the last segment of the C.L.E.A.R framework, R is for rhythm. This rhythm is just how you communicate. Some people love daily updates. Some others feel suffocated. Oh, I don't want my inbox to be flooded with daily updates. If you're a high frequency communicator and your colleague is a low frequency, you'll think, they're ignoring me. And they'll think, you're annoying. Just because you both have different standards, you both have different rhythms. So, setting a rhythm like a 10-minute sync every Tuesday removes the guesswork. You have to strike a balance somewhere. I've spent 25 years training people on confidence and clear communication. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that confidence does not come from knowing all the answers. It comes from having a clear process. And that's why the C.L.E.A.R framework works. It removes the stress of the unknown. Speaking of my 25 years teaching communication skills, I'm actually putting all of that experience into an upcoming course. It is titled How to Become the Most Confident Version of Yourself. It's not just about feeling brave, it's about the mechanics of how to stand your ground, of how to communicate so clearly that you never have to feel small again in a meeting. Stay tuned for that because it's going to be a game changer for anyone who feels like their confidence is being chipped away by difficult environments. If you want to be notified, just shoot me an email directly at info@sarikasingh.in. Now, I want to talk about Rohan again. Remember the person who emailed me? Because his colleague was blocking him. When we looked at his situation through the lens of clarity, we realized that they actually never discussed who owned the final outcome of the joint project. Rohan went back, made one subtle change. He didn't have a confrontation. He just said, "Hey, I realized I've never clarified who owns the final decision on the budget. To make things smoother, should that be you or should that be me?" Now, the ownership was clearly defined. Once the ownership was clearly defined, clarification was done, the friction vanished. The colleague stopped blocking because he no longer felt he had to protect his territory. When people don't take ownership, it's not usually because they're lazy. It's because they avoid stepping into something that feels unclear. And ambiguity is the enemy of accountability. If you want your team or your colleagues to step up, you have to give them a map where the finish line is. They need to have that clearly marked. So if you're dealing with a difficult person tomorrow morning, here's your homework. Don't try to change them. Instead, pause. Ask yourself, if he or she is difficult, what is unclear here? Go back to the clear checklist. Run through it. Are the roles defined? Are the expectations aligned? Who has the final call? Most of what we call office drama is just a clarity problem in disguise. When you reduce the ambiguity, you reduce the need for people to interpret your actions, and that's where the drama fades away. And before I go, make sure you tuned into the next episode because we are going to talk about a hard truth. If people don't get you, it's not your idea, it's your articulation. So, how to make people get you, how to make them understand you. We'll discuss why even the most brilliant ideas in the boardroom die simply because they were not packaged for the listener's brain. Until then, stay clear, stay confident, and check out my Insta handle Communicate101 because I share daily tips there on how to navigate these complex communication minefields. I hope this helps you breathe a little easier during your next meeting. This is Communicate 101, where we keep it simple so that it actually works. Thank you for listening to this episode of Communicate 101 Speaking Writing Tips with Sarika Singh. If you want to be notified of upcoming episodes, be sure to hit the subscribe button and follow the podcast. I'll be back to share more stories, more life experiences, and more communication tips every Friday. If you want to reach me or connect with me, just put your comments in the comment box below or mail me at info@sarikasingh.in. I know you're going to rate and review this podcast, so a big thank you in advance. Stay tuned and think about what we talked today.